Chief Trexler's up first, I believe. Jim, you have anything you want to say first?
No.
No? Okay, Chief?
All right. Good afternoon. So this is our budget presentation. I cut it down a little bit from last year, I hope. I don't remember what my time was last year, but I took a little bit out of there so I don't repeat from last year. But this is basically how we're gonna make Burlington a great place to live, work, and play in, above all, a safe place. So that's kind of what we're shooting for there. This is an overview of what I'm gonna touch on. Go back to 2016 and look at the final numbers. I'll look at FY18. Then the two budgets that I'll really look at within my, or sub-budgets within my budget is the fire control and the ambulance operations. Those are the two largest budgets in there. And I'll just briefly kind of hit on the other items, and then I'll talk about our capital. Oh, I included this last year, and I just wanted to put that up there again. Later on, I'll talk about our net cost to the city and where it's went, and how do we keep our net costs so low? Well, that's the big way that we do it right there, is by adding territory. And of course, when you add territory, you add number of calls, and that conversely ends up being more revenue for the fire department. So for FY16, our approved budget was about 4.8 million. We actually came in about 4.9. There's a number of reasons for that. The biggest would be the overtime and fire control budget. It's about 100,000 more than what we had budgeted. And there's our revenue, and the one thing to look at there is the FY16 net cost. So at the end of the year, that was our net cost to the city, 3.3 million. A number of reasons for that. Safer grant carried some people that year, and also ambulance revenue was very high again. So, and that'll be a theme throughout the next few years. I'll just kind of go over what the different revenue sources were in 2016. The ambulance billing of 1,048,000, that's that year's billing. So that's the people that we billed that year and they paid that year. The ambulance other could be anytime in the last 10 years. So if somebody didn't pay it in the current year, we can go back 10 years. So those kind of stay on the books, and some people make payments. I think some are as little as $5 a month. As long as they keep paying on it, then they stay current. So that number I expect over the years will go down. Dana, that's been doing our billing, she's kind of getting caught up on the past years. And I think she's a lot more proficient than what we had before. So there's not a lot of that old debt carried over from year to year. People are staying up a lot better. So that other stuff should not be as high in future years. The Quad Township, the 120,000 for FY16. I think this year it's already budgeted for 128, so that should go up. Hazmat's been steady ever since we've had a hazmat team. That's what the county pays us to provide hazmat. And so the total was 1.3 million. I took out the SAFER. That was that federal grant. Really count that as revenue. Kind of boosted our number up there over 1.5 million, which would be an anomaly. That won't be there again. So kind of a look at our budget history. What we're proposing this year is a budget of 4.9 million, round numbers. FY17 approved was 4.8. Our actual, again, for FY16, I already talked about that, was 4,956,000. Our net for FY18 is 3.5 million.
Hit back a slide here,
Okay.
Chief.
I don't know why
The Quad Township, does it have an automatic increaser in it per year, or how does that?
No, they pay us it's 80% of the max that they levy.
Okay.
And I don't know what it's like a 0.65 or 65 or 60 levy, I'm not sure, but they pay us whatever 80% of that is. So I think last year property values went up in the county, so the amount they collected went up, and hence they pay us 80% of whatever that is. It started out the first year was like 108,000. I think it's went steady up since then, since 2011. So not a huge increase, but we're looking at 128,000 for this year.
How long a time period do we have an agreement with them?
It's a 10-year agreement.
10 year. Okay. Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome. So our let's go on to the next one here. The better picture of our budgets over the years since FY14. You can see we went from about a 4.6 to a 4.9 this year, so in a 5-year, 5 different budget years, our total increase is about, averages 1.4 per year. If you have any questions about that. And the reason you'll see some of our actuals are a little higher than well, there's a show on there. We had the safer funded positions in there. But this is the slide right here, our fire department net cost. FY14, we're at 3.4 million. That's what it costs the city to have the fire department, the fire control, ambulance, everything included. So our cost minus the revenue was 3.4 million. FY15 was about 3 million, or about 3.1. That was largely due to the SAFER grant. We hired the 3 people. Our overtime budget was really low. We also hired about 8 people in that fiscal year, so we had a lot of new hires at the lower end of the wage scale. FY16, 17 approved. FY18 proposed is 3.5 million, and that's really our goal. And if you can look over from, again, a 5-year time period, our net cost to the city is actually up less than 1% per year. It's actually a 3% gain over 5 years. And really the big reason for that is the revenue. Every year our revenue goes up, so it keeps our net cost pretty much the same or close to. This is just to show what our budget, that's off of the OpenGov page. It's kind of hard to read, but
I can't see it either. So.
yeah. Basically, that whole big thing that you see is all personnel costs, and that other little sliver there is, supplies, fuel, station maintenance, and that kind of thing. It says, has the dollar amount, and that's for this budget year coming up. That's what we're proposing. I can't even read it myself. It's 4.49 million is personnel costs, so about 500,000 in total other costs. And speaking of personnel costs, that's what we get for our personnel. That's a department of 43, 42. Oh, darn it. I doctored up the wrong one there. I left Dana Hunter off of there. So I apologize to her. We should have 42 firefighters and 1 administrative assistant or civilian off to the side there. But that's currently the firefighter staff that we have. I just updated that. That first shift over here on the left, Brighton Seaberg, he just started last week. And then there in the center, we have one there at the bottom, Trevor Detman, he just turned in his resignation, so he'll be replaced here in the next couple weeks. So I think last time I was up here, we talked about how many people leave the department. That's 4 since May that have left for various reasons. 1 was a retirement, the other left for other employment. Didn't want these to be single clicks, but so there's our core services, and we're going to talk about the different line item budgets in there. But basically, we cover EMS, fire suppression, fire prevention, which includes fire investigation, do hazmat, technical rescue. Last year, we had 4,882 calls. And I just kind of included that picture there just as a point to say, when I say we had 4,882 calls, the majority of them, while they might not take that many people, our average on a call is 3 people. And so each time we go out, you can just say, there goes 3 people every time the alarm goes off, which is a little bit different than, say, the police department, where they maybe have some more calls that are handled by 1 person. We really don't have any calls that we count in our call total that are 1 person, unless maybe a couple illegal burns or something like that. But ambulance call, any fire calls always take at least 2 people, if not more. And so we average 3 people. If we had a little bit higher staffing, that number would be up. And I say that because our south side stations usually has 4 people at it. So when you go to car wreck or CPR in progress, they empty out the station and they only get 4 people, where the downtown, if you're on the north side and we have a car accident or CPR or shooting, stabbing, we have certain calls that require the engine company, instead of 4, you would have 5 people there, so. So our ambulance budget for FY18, we're proposing a budget of $1,335,000. That's an increase of about 1.88%. The majority of that is all wages, personnel costs. Our revenue projected is 1.2 million, meaning the net cost next year would be $124,000. Compared to 2016 that we have the numbers for, our ambulance cost is $158,000. And I say ambulance budget, that's well, I'll get that on the next slide here. So that covers 12 people, so there's 4 per shift that's taken out of we call the ambulance budget, but there's a lot of other costs in there, the training, the fuel, the supplies. We'd have those costs regardless if we had the 12 people, so. And I would say that the revenue more than pays for or right at pays for the 12 people. If you took out all the other costs, it covers the 12 personnel. And I kind of talked about some of this last year, but what do we get for that 124,000? Well, we do get experienced, dependable, reliable EMS response. But our guys do go on a lot of calls, and gals. That's good and bad. They have a lot of experience. They're very good at their jobs. Do have a lot of younger guys that are just out of school, but they are spot on, very well trained. I've been doing a lot of the continuous quality improvement checks, of reading their ambulance reports, and some of the stuff they do now, I couldn't even dream about doing that when I was a paramedic on the ambulance. It's very advanced, without any orders from a doctor. It's just in their protocols, and they can do it in the field. It's pretty amazing. The other thing we get is excellent response times. In the city of Burlington, we're right at 5 minutes and 30 seconds for all EMS calls. It's hard, I can't divide those out between non-emergency and emergency unless I look at each call and read the narrative to figure it out. But there are, since we started using EMD, some of our calls are dispatched what we call priority 2, which means, yeah, they still just drop whatever they're doing, go down to the ambulance, hop on there, take the call, they just don't go there lights and sirens. So if you're running somewhere out, say by Hope Haven or out off West Avenue, and you're driving without lights and sirens, you're stopping at every stop sign, just like a regular, So that increases the response times, is what I'm saying. But that's still a great response time. The other thing we can do is we have 5 ambulances, and if we have enough people there, we can go 5 out at once. That'd be a very rarity, but 3 out, it seems to be a normal occurrence. Almost daily, we have a A3 call. Every scene we go on, we bring a paramedic with us. We're getting to the point where all of our staff is going to be a paramedic. I think we have 2 EMTs left on each shift, and as they retire, they'll be replaced by paramedics. So everywhere we go, everybody will be a paramedic, which is great. Allows them to switch out their time on the ambulance. Also allows us, when we're at a fire and if something, you go there and there's a victim, you have a paramedic there with you.
So if you send out 3 ambulances, that means there's 6 people gone?
That's 6 people, at a minimum. Depends on what the call types are. If you're going to a motor vehicle accident, then you have to have an engine company.
Then you have an engine company.
And there's, like I said, all these, we call them special calls. If it's a shooting, stabbing, unresponsive, CPR in progress, those all take more than the 2 that are on the ambulance. So,
You could use up your 10 people in a hurry then, can't you?
yes, yeah. And again, like I said, that the revenue from the ambulance does cover a lot of other expenses, EMS training, equipment, station maintenance costs. And if we didn't have these 4 people per shift and we were down to working 6-person minimums, I'm not so sure. I haven't asked the Quad Township, but I doubt they're going to say, hey, we want to pay you all this money to respond 6 guys to a fire out in the county. Also, we use that, we covered the ambulance with all those people, also the hazmat team. If you were down to 6 people on duty, it'd be kind of hard to respond to anything very serious. Any questions about the ambulance budget? Okay. The next budget there is the fire control budget. That's the largest part of our budget. Other than the 12 that are assigned to the ambulance budget, it has All the firefighters are in there, the 3 battalion chiefs, the captains and the lieutenants are all assigned here. Our proposed budget is $3,039,000. That's an increase of about 1.32%. Our revenue there is the $129,000, that's the Quad Township that we talked about. There's some other revenue that we get, motor vehicle accidents. We charge those in a couple of grass fire calls, so there's a little bit of other revenue that's not in there. Here's the one we don't like to talk about so much, but it's the fire overtime budget. And again, I took that off of the Open Gov page. It's kind of hard to read. I couldn't change the colors or make it any easier to read, but basically you can see on average, we're right around $150,000 per year. There's the anomaly there of 2014-15. That was the first year of the SAFER grant where we had the 3 extra people. I kept our minimum staffing at 10. I had the extra person. Those totals there also include our ambulance overtime budget. Usually that's anywhere from 15 to 30,000. And that's actually one of the overtimes that's good. Whenever we have ambulance overtime, it means we're generating revenue. The only time we use that is when they're taking out-of-county transfers. So if we're going to Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, Davenport with a patient, we call in people to backfill. And that's one of those areas where I think last time I might have talked about some revenue areas that we may bring in more. That would be one of the areas. That's just hard to get people when they've worked a 24-hour shift to come in now and take an ambulance transfer, especially when they're later at night.
So most of your overtime is not a full shift, then? Is that what you're saying?
No, most of my overtime is a full shift.
Oh,
It's a
it is a full shift.
24-hour overtime shift, yeah. So then the more 24 hours you have, the less people are gonna wanna take the 5 and 6 hours. Back when we didn't have so much 24-hour overtime, when people wanted to earn some extra money, they were more likely to take an ambulance transfer, if that makes sense. Now I'm not saying there's too much overtime, but there's enough where people can be picky and like, I really don't need the money. I don't want to come in and work another shift. And I think we kind of talked about that being unhealthy, that much overtime. The other thing is, a couple years ago, we talked about the compression between the union and non-union. This definitely makes a huge difference there because the captains are only a few 24 overtime shifts from equaling a battalion chief who's not allowed to work a 24-hour overtime. So, because they're not a union or they're a salaried employee. So, when you're working a 24-hour shift and you're making, even if it's, I think some of them are $29 to $30 an hour on overtime. So right around $700 is what I usually figure roundabout. Doesn't take too many of those and you're equal to a battalion chief. A little bit frustrating as a battalion chief. I worked 4 years as a battalion chief, and then at the end of the year, your captains, great people, and I have nothing against them, but they end up making more money than you, and that is, that does detract from, do I want to take this promotion or not to battalion chief? So it does play a role. The remainder of the areas in my budget, fire administration, that's myself, the deputy chief, Dana Hunter. Our budget increase is about 0.21% to up to $375,000, and that's what the budget numbers show. However, last year we had some capital that was expensed to fire administration, is $14,500. So if I took that $14,500 out of there, it'd be, I'm not sure what the percent would be, but it'd be a lot more than 0.2%. Fire prevention, $138,000. That's the 3.89% is almost all personnel increase. The hazmat team, 26,000. That's up 5%. And that seems like a lot, but I mean the whole budget's only 26,000. And what we did is put some overtime costs in there. Our hazmat team is spread out all over the 3 shifts. In order for them to do their training about 4 times a year, we usually hire an instructor, or Gina Harden's got us a lot of grants to pay for the instructor to come in one day. And it may be a $5,000 class for one day. Well, you don't want to keep that person 3 days teaching, so you have them come in one day and then have your personnel come in on overtime. So that's how we've done that. And we do we get paid $48,000 a year to have a hazmat team, so it does kind of paying out dollar-wise. The airport is up 10%. That's all due to training cost increases. They're really wanting us to keep up our airport certification, and I think this is our third year we've used that outside instructor. He comes down with a prop and he certifies people on shift to cover the airport. We're gonna extend that to all 3 shifts, so all 3 shifts will have certified people on duty to cover the airport for the flights. I know the airport's talking about adding the flights and they're wanting to get bigger airplanes. If they get any bigger airplanes, we'll have to have certified people, so that's where that comes from. Any questions about any of those other?
Do you have the same people at the airport all the time, or do they rotate?
No, they rotate. So what we've been doing, like this last time we had the class 2 days in a row, I think they had it twice each day. We allowed the shift that wasn't working to send their guy, if they wanted to come, they could do it on overtime, so we paid them overtime for the training. When I said twice a day, I think that each class was 4 hours long. Sorry, I'm through with the regular, I'm on to the capital budget. So this next year, FY18, we have heart monitors and AEDs in there. I gave you a copy of our capital. That's the page I forgot to staple on the back of that packet. It's by itself there. We had originally had in this budget for 3 monitors. I think we maybe had 78,000 in there, which wouldn't have been enough, but we got that AFG grant to buy the monitor, so we took that out. This is mostly for AEDs, and actually today I talked to the battalion chief in charge of EMS, and I think we're gonna probably forego the monitor, out of this one, so that 34,700 will be largely not spent, more like $10,000 on AEDs. The fire equipment, that includes the turnout gear. Every year we budget for 5 sets of turnout gear. They're roughly $2,000, depends on when we bid that out every year and try to get the best price possible, but that keeps everybody on about a 7-year replacement cycle for the guys that are actually fighting the fires. Like my turnout gear will probably wear it till I retire, but most of the other guys, about every 5 years or so, they need to get new turnout gear. So that keeps them, and then as we hire people, they get turnout gear.
Good. I'm trying to understand about the heart monitors again.
Yeah. So if you would go back to last year's budget, you'd see we had, for FY18, we had $78,000 in there.
Okay.
To buy 3 heart monitors, which wasn't really quite enough. But then we applied for that AFG grant for 3 heart monitors that we got. So we got those this year already, so we don't need the 3 heart monitors. What this was gonna be for was 1, so we have 5 ambulances, we have 5 heart monitors. We were thinking about, well, we need one for training, what if one breaks? We have to put it on there. But we started talking about, say, they're very reliable. If one breaks, we can call the company and they'll send us a loaner. We can get a loaner of a different model from the hospital, so we really don't need to get a 6th heart monitor. So originally when we put this in there, that's what the extra monitor is for, but we're just gonna forego that cost. It's about $25,000 that we had budgeted in there. And the rest of that, I don't have that sheet in front of me, but it has the cost for the AEDs, I believe, is $9,700 off that.
Yeah, so there's a $25,000 savings in there somewhere.
Yes, that's coming off of there.
That gives us some leeway to play with or something else, is that what you're saying?
That's up to Jim. I'm not gonna spend it
Okay, that's good.
on capital.
I'm looking for $25,000, that's great. Good.
Back to the fire equipment. So there's the turnout gear, there's some other hose appliances that we need, nozzles, gate valves. The SCBA bottles, they are super expensive, but we have some that are expiring that we have to replace. Luckily, they kind of graduate year by year, more bottles go out of date, so it's not like you have to replace the whole stock at one time. So this year, we're gonna replace 7 of them. The command car, that's something we moved up from FY19. I think it's something that we had moved from 18 to 19, and now we're gonna move it back from 19 to 18. The way that the command car is what you see the battalion chiefs driving. That's on all the fire scenes, most of the car accidents. The one we have now has a lot of mileage and wear and tear on it. What we'll do with the old one, what we do is rotate cars back. So this car will become another person's car. And in the end, when you move the cars down that we're getting rid of, it's an 18-year-old Ford Taurus that way over on mileage, rusty. You just don't, it's something every time you spend some money on it, you're like, I can't believe we're putting more money into this car. So long story short, I think that.
You gonna replace that this year?
Well, when we get the command car, we'll take the old command car and move it down into probably the deputy chief's spot, and then his car will move out to Station 2. Station 2's car will go bye-bye. So, we'll try to trade it in if possible. We'll see what happens. And the command car, I looked at the cost today. We're about $28,000 for the vehicle itself, whether we go with an SUV like we have now or a pickup. And then the remaining costs are radios, the graphics, and the lighting on the car. And that's where you get up to the $43,000 for the car. Will you state bid for the car? I was gonna say, just to touch on those two items right there, I think the ambulance was actually in this fiscal year's capital budget. The engine was in last year's, but between the two of them, I just kind of looked at the cost that we were saving. In 2016, we spent around $100,000, no, $88,000 on repairs for engines out of the fire control budget.
Wow.
Just ridiculous amount. We're nowhere near that now with the new engine. Same with the ambulance. Now we have two newer ambulances that are very rarely in the repair shop, so that makes a big difference in our budget. I went too far ahead. All right, capital over the next 5 years. The turnout gear is pretty much set in there. Central Station, when we did the remodel back in 2002, the one thing they didn't do was the hose tower, which is there on the left picture. And it's actually not the outside, it's the inside, and we do still have to hang hose in there. We have to hang rope in there to dry. The walls it's all cracking and falling down. It looks really good on the outside, and we had a local contractor come and give us an estimate. He said the outside is great, the inside needs a skim coating on it or something like that. Anyway, he estimated about $15,000, so that's where that is in 2019. The Knox box key secure devices are about, I think we have 15,000 in there for that as well. We ask businesses that have any kind of alarm system to put a Knox box on the outside of the building, and we have a key that opens the box, and inside the box are their
nice.
keys. Well, you don't want anybody to walk away with our master key to all these boxes, so we take their security very serious, and we have, all the first out vehicles have a key secure device now where you put the key in there and you turn it and it locks. You have to put your code in there, and then you can get the key out. Well, it keeps track of when and who took the key out. And we've had these same boxes for, I'm gonna say 7 or 8 years. Well, Knox box will no longer support them after this year. So we're looking to replace those in the following year. Hopefully we can nurse the ones we got through. We usually don't have a lot of problems with them, but the new ones are a lot nicer as far as the fire marshal can be in his office and they're Wi-Fi connected, so he can.
When did that come out with the Knox?
Well, we've had Knox box keys since I've been on the department. I think there was probably an issue before I started. I don't want to talk about that so much, but we've had the keys on our rigs for a long time. A lot better security now than what we had before. What's the next thing on there? We're at an ambulance every 3 years, I'm sorry. And then a fire engine every whenever, but we have the next one in FY20. That year, if you look through the fire department capital, we go from somewhere around 100,000 this year to, I think that year's like 850,000, because it's got an engine and an ambulance budgeted in the same year. So I offered to move either one of those up 1 year. Jim would let me. So probably if I had to pick between the two, I would pick the fire engine just because of the cost. I mean, we are running an older engine out at Station 2, but the ambulance we did put in on another grant this year. We're still waiting to hear back on that, but we applied for an ambulance. So hopefully we've been getting something every year. Maybe that's the one that we get this next year. That would be really nice. Any questions on capital? All right. There it is. So some things that we're working on, again, we're constantly working toward meeting the NFPA standards, whether that's equipment that we carry, response times, number of people that show up on scenes. So whatever we can do to make that happen. Training, We've been without an actual training officer since, I think, 2011, 2010. And we've tried different things, different people trying to take on the role of training officer for fire, EMS, hazmat. We just started January 1st with a new policy. The battalion, well, actually the shifts are picking up the different training. So one shift has EMS training, one shift has fire, one shift has all the rest, special ops, hazmat, ice rescue, all that stuff. So we're going to see how that works. It's not the best situation. Just because if you have the EMS shift and their battalion chief working on all the EMS training, it's hard to then train the other two shifts when he's not at work. We're going to go with that for a while. Firefighter health and safety. Again, I think we've made a lot of improvements in health and safety. We're working on getting better physicals, but the guys have been really good about working out, staying healthy. We've done some policy changes as far as bariatric, the bariatric patients, that kind of thing. The workouts from the hospital have been awesome. We're about a year into that. They were there this morning. They come faithfully, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They've never failed to show up. The other day when I worked out there, I think there was 10 of us working out. So it's just a group of on or off duty people, whoever can get in there to work out. So it's been a great opportunity for our guys. And I hope they're not listening, but so far no cost to us for that. So they've been sending that trainer out for a year, two different trainers. It's been very well received at our department. And then fire prevention, that's very important to us. The smoke detector program's still going really great. We actually ran out of smoke detectors last week.
Oh, really?
We had some funds that people had given us. We'd go put a smoke detector up and they're like, can we pay you some money? And we're like, no, but you can donate to the fire prevention fund, and that's what that money's been for, is to buy smoke detectors. So we did just order some more. Hopefully they'll be in this week. The state ran out of theirs. Hopefully they'll get another grant soon and have some that we can get from them. All right, so just real quick on community involvement. I can say over the last year, 2 years, we've really stepped up our community involvement, whether any board or committee in Des Moines County that has to do with fire or EMS, not only are we participating in the boards, normally we hold some officer position. I'm currently, thanks to Chief Beard and others, the chair of the E911 board. We have the president and vice president of the Des Moines County Firefighters Association. I'm the treasurer of Des Moines County EMS. Bruce Workman is, I can't remember the title, he's the vice president of Mavis Division 62. I'm on the DESCOM advisory board. Battalion Chief Jeff McGee's the vice president of the Southeast Alliance on Critical Incident Stress Management. Of course, we're represented on the Iowa Hazmat Task Force and that committee, and a lot of other groups. So we're doing that. We're doing a lot of presentations to community groups, lots of station tours, especially during October, but whenever. Just today, we had 15 people from ADM in doing a CPR class. Our Explorer program, I just checked, we have three kids in there right now, and I say kids, but some of them could be up to 21 years old, but there's always kids coming in and out of that program. A lot of those Explorers have went on to careers in fire and EMS. Some of them we've hired, some are out of West Burlington. There's a kid out in Chicago. They're all over the place. So that's a great program for us. And I talked about smoke detectors, and then the numbers up. We're still in the middle of that. We got a little bit of territory to cover on that yet. So I covered the budget, so now here comes the big slide I hopefully you're interested in. I presented a budget with no personnel additions. But at a minimum, what I would like to see is one person per shift, which is 3 people total. And again, I used the high estimate there, 270,000. One thing I don't like to give up is the overtime and say, oh, let's add 1 per shift and then just keep our minimum staffing in 10. Yes, that's helpful, not overly helpful, but there would be an overtime savings there. And based on the year we had the 3 safer people, we would probably save somewhere around $100,000 annually on that. And that'd be with no change to the minimum staffing. There would be a lot of days, as long as we didn't have injuries, where we would be at 11 or more. Again, I just thought it was important to note, and I don't know that these numbers will bear out at the end of the year, but our FY projected for 17, our net cost is $3,577,000, and for 18, it's $3,511,000. So net cost, will that be where we end up? I don't know. Actually, our FY 17 may be more than that with the overtime. I'm not sure if that included that cost in there. I don't think so.
You're
You can-
tracking
that's
right
not
now
with any
about
of the-
$50,000 more expensive.
Yeah. But our revenue, we don't know where the revenue, I mean, I think generally we guess a little low, so. But we're not a huge increase in our net cost to the city, if not a net decrease. I don't know if I need to go through all the reasons that we need to add this one person. I'll be happy to do that.
I don't think so.
Just,
I mean, well, let's check with do you guys want him to go through any of that? I mean, I think we
the only thing I
went
would like to
through
say
that.
is and I talked about the silver tsunami and all that, but it's not just us, it's all the communities, and it's, at a minimum, 200 calls. Every year, we're just gonna add 200, 200, 200, if not 300. And yes, we take more calls, but yes, every time the ambulance goes out, on average, it's about $300. You might say, wow, only $300? Well, that takes into account the no transports, the treated and released on scene, and then the transport. So you take all those into consideration, and the Medicare patients that you get about, not Medicare, Medicaid, where you bring in about $90 for an ambulance call. So on average, I've done it for several years now, we're right about the $300. Every time you hear the ambulance siren, that's what the revenue is for that. So if you add 200 calls, $60,000 revenue increase with that.
Chief, I just want to say before anybody else says anything, you guys have a great department, and not just that, but the fire department means a lot to the community. It really, really does. So I'm just saying that because if it wasn't for budgetary issues, I don't think that anybody would have a problem with giving you the 6 firemen whatsoever, because you guys are a great department, and you do mean a lot to the community. I'm just throwing that out there. It's not that we don't want to give you what you need. It's just we got to think about the dollar thing. But I definitely see a need that we do have to address.
Yeah, one thing, if we could budget these 3 positions in there, we'd be willing to not do the hiring until we heard back from Safer. So if it takes till the middle of August, or like I said, it's the government, they say middle of August, that may mean middle of September before all the Safer grants are awarded. At least then if we were awarded the grant, we would have the money already budgeted. And then actually we would be less than the $270,000 with the Safer grant, the first 2 years, if that makes sense. And actually we would get more people than the 3 for less money, the first 2 years.
So when I'm trying to figure this out in my head and on paper, if the SAFER grant comes through, there'd be roughly, we need about $100,000 in the budget to cover. Is that correct?
135, yeah.
135. Okay. That includes less overtime,
Yep.
130.
Well, no, that doesn't, that's just the cost. That's not any overtime deductions. If we were to add 2 per shift and we just move the minimum to 11 versus 12, then yeah, you would see about the $100,000 overtime savings. So theoretically, a net cost to the city of about $35,000.
Your net overtime savings, you may or may not see, that fluctuates a lot from year to year. The first year of the SAFER grant, the overtime was $72,000. The second year, you were $170,000. Yet those positions were staffed for the first 10 or 11 months of 16, and your overtime was still significantly high. So we
Well,
do have variances that occur from one
Those
year to the
those 3
next.
people were all in school that whole year.
The
That's
second
what-
year?
The second year. They were in school the entire, they were started in August and they got out the following July. And then we didn't hire back the 1 position in January, so only 2 shifts had to Safer.
There's only 2.
Yeah,
the
there's
whole
2
time.
shifts of 14 and 1 of 13. So the 1 at 13
Well,
then had a person in school, so pretty much every day during the week anyway, they were on overtime.
I guess, Chief, I'm trying to figure out on paper how we can afford to have the SAFER grant. So I really need some right, 137.5 for years 1 and 2. And then,
The third years.
then less the overtime after, the savings and overtime taken away from that 137? Would that be correct?
Somewhere in there, yep.
Whatever that
But
happens to be.
What's our percentage?
25. 25 the first 2 years.
20.
Oh, I thought it was 35, okay.
Yeah, we pay 25, 25, and then the third year, they pay 35%. We pay 65.
So if I'm working to get that in the budget, is $100,000 a number to use, or,
If we were gonna count on the SAFER grant,
that's what I mean?
yeah.
Is that a safe number even with the safer grant, though?
That'd be a safe number, but to say that's gonna add personnel to the fire department is gonna be a stretch, because the SAFER grant is out there, but the chance of us actually getting the SAFER
Well, I
grant is very
understand that.
slim.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, I want to make sure we have money in there. If we do get it,
You said that.
how much do we need? That's my issue.
You think the possibilities are getting,
Because it's
of
the
getting a
third
safer is
years,
slim?
the killer, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's, like I said, there's thousands of departments applying. She said they give about 300 awards out per year. So we'll make ourselves look as good as we can on paper, you know, do the best we can with the grant, but so are a lot of other departments.
Sure. Okay. So $100,000 is a good number for me to work with then. That's what.
If we got the SAFER grant. If we don't get the SAFER grant, $100,000 would pay for one person, which,
Yeah. One person, which doesn't help you a whole lot.
right.
Okay.
Questions for the chief, you guys?
No questions, only comment,
Yes, sir.
but with or without the SAFER grant, we still need a fire department that's adequate in size to serve our community. And we need to look at other opportunities or other options for funding those departments. And I hope before we're done with this budgeting cycle that we can have a sincere, honest discussion on how we're going to achieve that. Because I think it's achievable.
Well, we're gonna have to have that discussion.
Yes, we are.
You'll have to have that discussion with not just this department, but as you know, the police department's proposal last week, you haven't had any talk about what your thoughts are on, he mentioned 6 potential positions there, where your thoughts are on how realistic that you as a group feel that is, if it's a higher number, if it's a lower number, if it's no number. That kind of sets a little bit of a parameter as to what are your options, or what could you look to feasibly try to get to where you covered the 2 different areas together.
I want to hear the rest of the department's proposals, because I know there's at least one other part-time position request coming. And I think it's a very valid, a very necessary request also.
Within the nuisance department?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I concur, and that was my point at our last meeting. I said, hey, sometime we got to talk about how we're going to pay for this, and so
It's not gonna pay for
that's why I
itself.
wanted to know, bottom line for SAFER, what do we need to do? Because I think I can find enough for that, but,
With the safer grant.
yeah, with the
Right.
SAFER. And I think I can find one position in the police department so they can add a detective, but after that, then it gets kind of dicey, so.
But for the safer grant, you're not covering the third year.
The third year is an issue.
That's
Yeah,
another.
it's an issue,
And the 4th?
yeah.
Well, that goes
And the
without
fourth is a
saying,
bigger issue, yeah. Yep.
Thank you, chief.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything you need to? throw
Well,
out there before-
just as you think through the context of what's being presented, that's for ballpark numbers, 100,000 each of the first 2 years. Another Two,
Like 50.
about 300,000 for the third year, and about 500,000 for the
Oh,
fourth
was
year.
that 300 total for the?
300,000 for year three in the fire department. Somewhere in that neighborhood
Okay.
would be our share net of some overtime savings.
In the fourth
And about
year?
500,000 in the fourth year in today's dollars,
Oh, my.
with some overtime savings. And the police department, with those 6 positions, you're looking at about 250,000 the first year. The second year would have been about 400,000 between the capital or the capital equipment for the 2 new plus training, and then the ongoing for the first 2. And
775 for all 3 years and about 600 ongoing after that.
yeah, so year 3 is in that 700,000 range, and year 4 about 600,000 and ongoing after that. So between the 2, by year 4, you're talking a figure of about 1.1 million of additional costs to try to cover. And whether you're finding that from some savings in other departments, as was mentioned, or increased revenues, we kind of mentioned a ballpark for what it would take on a property tax levy, about $1.50 to cover that kind of a revenue increase.
But that wouldn't have to be all in one shot, though, right?
No, you would, but you'd have to be putting yourself in a position to be getting up to that.
Right.
And it's hard to make a decision now that you don't, if you commit the city to expenditures and then put
Right.
the decision on a future council to have to raise taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow you have to balance that out to where you have a plan in place that does that. You're putting, that's a tough decision for you as a group to have to do, where you're making a decision, getting input from, whether it's emails or phone calls or whatever, from constituents. And, I mean, you're gonna hear some pretty vocal concerns or support from different entities and a mixture of feelings. You do have one other revenue stream that you could talk about.
What would that be, Jim?
You had the franchise fee as something that was discussed 3 years ago and was ultimately not approved. If you want to get public input on as you get a plan together as to what you want to do staffing-wise and what it would cost to do it to improve our emergency services, you could go forward with the idea of what would it take from a franchise fee implemented to cover that cost, to raise additional revenue to do it, and just have it out there for a vote with the public.
At this point, I'm ready to look at every option, and I think it needs to be, I'd like to see what that information is, and I think it needs to be out there personally. I do. I think we owe it to the citizens of Burlington to cover every angle to try to make this work, so I personally want to see that out there.
I'm
What,
not sold on that myself,
what-
but
what's the details of that? I mean, what are you talking?
When we looked at it 3 years ago, a franchise fee, the first 1%, if you charged a 1% franchise fee, you'd pretty much offset by reduced local option sales tax revenue. But the second percent, on the electric side at that point was about $300,000 of revenue. And on the gas, the second percent would be 100,000 of revenue. The third percent would be another 300 and 100,000. So you could have a 3% franchise fee and see about 800,000 of ongoing revenue from that. Some communities that have implemented a franchise fee have done it in I think Cedar Rapids did theirs where they had it set to automatically jump from 1% to another in subsequent years once they implemented it. So you could actually look at even having some authorizing language that incorporated that if you were talking about seeing stair-stepped costs in your program or needs.
Can funds like that be restricted, that they?
You certainly can. You have a revenue purpose statement that goes with that, and you can specifically put on there, when we did it the last time, we used the full broad range of what it could be used for. And I couldn't quote you the list, but roads, emergency services, and were two of the items, and there were 3 or 4 other fairly broad categories. Here, if you were doing it specifically towards emergency services, police and fire,
Would be just
for-
strictly-
you could limit it to the additional staffing and equipping of emergency services. Still a fairly generic title, but it is limited towards this specified goal.
And the reason you're favoring that is because the public would have a right to vote.
Then
And if
you're,
they
yes,
voted no, where are we?
then you don't have the funds to do it, and
That's
you
right.
are in a position not to be adding those staff positions.
Right.
So, but that's something that if you aren't willing to go down that road, then that's not the way you should be looking at it. What it does give you is, if you do go down that route, is the ability to say, we want to know, we think this is worthwhile doing, but we also want to make sure the public in general thinks this is worthwhile doing.
It just doesn't appeal to me.
It would sure speak volumes. I mean, it's, here's, in my personal opinion, that the public safety is the most important aspect of what we do right now, funding them. And that's what I have heard from the public that I've talked with over and over again in the last few weeks. We've, if I'm reading it right, then if we were to use that type of funding and put it to a vote of the people, then it's gonna pass. If I'm reading it wrong, it's gonna fail.
The reason I don't agree with that, at least right now, we have a job to do up here. And we're never gonna satisfy all of the people all the time. I think the 5 of us have already agreed that public safety is a critical issue for this city. And I think we have an obligation to do whatever it takes to address those needs. And if that means a tax increase, which I know is the bad word, but to me, so be it. I mean, the idea of putting this thing on a franchise thing up to vote and then it's voted down, then I guess we can hide behind that and say, well, you really didn't want to be concerned. Well, I'm not looking for an excuse, I guess. It's up to us. I mean, we have to make those decisions. And now maybe if we think we need a tax increase, can you have an election on that? No. Right. But anyway, those are just my views.
The other thing that you mentioned last time that got no publicity, and I couldn't understand why, was doing something with the auditorium, and when you're thinking, $300,000 to $400,000 roughly we're
Yep.
spending on that building for,
It's
a
just-
few events a year, however many, they're coming a week from tonight and giving us all that information, but there's a place where you could
Oh,
find
yes.
$300,000 to $400,000 by doing something different with that facility. Now, I think we need to talk about that too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think it needs to come up, but I just want to say that doing the auditorium, doing something with the auditorium, which we need to do, I think down the road in 3 years, we would just have to find another auditorium. We've got to we've got to set aside money strictly for this, and I think that's only going to happen through a tax increase, which I'm totally against. I am totally against a tax increase. Franchise fee, the people are into that, then let's get her done. Let's get her done and quit playing around. If they don't, then I'm not sure what the option is, but I'm not for shutting the lights off on stuff in town to make this happen. So I really am interested in hearing what the citizens have to
Well-
say, but I'm glad we are getting the franchise fee out there.
If you go that route, then you cannot budget anything in this current budget for any personnel, because
That's right.
that vote won't
That's right.
happen between now and, I mean, it's iffy, you can't budget for it.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I think it's irresponsible for us to sit here and keep a building open that's costing us $400,000 a year. And we've tried, private sector and public sector in operating that building, and it's not working. It's come to a point where we need to take the next step, and that is shuttering the building and putting it up for sale, and letting the private sector take it completely and do with what is, can be done to make it profitable or to make it go away. And the public sector has stepped up in this community in the light of the Capitol Theater redevelopment, and in the development out on Roosevelt, in our hotels and motels, and the expansion of services that they're offering. And we're gonna be competing with them more and more and more for the same kind of venues that we were hoping for at the auditorium. Let the private sector capitalize on it and let us get out of the business
I'd love to see
that we're
that
losing.
happen. I'd love to see that happen.
Well, I don't see why we can't do both. Obviously, put the franchise fee up for vote while we continue to look for ways we can get that money on our own. I don't see why that would be an issue.
Well, I mean, that's definitely what we gotta keep doing.
I mean,
And,
we don't have to do one or the other.
I agree, Andy.
We can do both.
I agree.
Well, I had one businessman tell me today that if we can show, or that we can cut some non-essential services, that he would certainly support paying more taxes in whatever form for public safety. Public safety and infrastructure is the way he put it.
Yeah, that's,
well, we're gonna be getting down to it. Who's,
Eric is up, and his presentation, I think he said, was 2.5 hours long.
yes.
I object. Oh, pardon me.
Actually, your setup, which, are you going through development first and then parks?
Yeah.
And he's set to where, as he gets done with the development prior to the parks, depending on time, if you want to, he's also flexible to finish on Thursday. And that's, we've tentatively set up him as a transition from one night to the next.
The parks is double what the development is, just because there's more involved with it, just so that you know.
So maybe you should have done that first, but,
I can go through it either way.
oh, go
I mean,
through your
they're-
development, the way you have it set up to go through.
Ready to just go right in? All right, just to start, kind of the goals of development and parks, to improve the safety and appeal of our community through high-quality customer service and consistent code enforcement, and to enhance the lives of residents and visitors to our community by providing high-quality park and recreation facilities, fun and safe recreation programs, and environmentally sound services. So this is the organizational chart of development and parks. On the administration side, the development parks director and project coordinator both serve over and function with both departments, though they're budgeted out of the development department. Myself out of the planning and zoning, and the project coordinator out of the building code administration. Code inspections has 4 full-time employees, planning and zoning has 1. Parks has 4 full-time employees, 1 permanent part-time. That's 2 on the park side, 2 on the forestry side. 2 out of recreation, which includes 1 for the golf course and 1 rec manager, is split 50-50 between the recreation budget and the golf course budget, and 2 out of the recplex. As you can see, the seasonal full-time equivalents, our seasonal employees, outnumber our actual full-time employees. So into the community development side, we have building code administration and planning and zoning. Again, just overview, the services include building permits and inspections, which includes construction, electrical, plumbing, mechanical, sewer demo, plan review, kind of whatever comes forward on that particular day. Rental inspections, nuisance inspections and compliance, and planning and zoning, which serves as a kind of broad overview position. Site plan review, coordination with the city boards and commissions, projects, grant administration, kind of a catch-all for the city. Some of the issues within the department, as we see and are pointed out quite a bit, nuisance, abandoned, deteriorating properties. We are an older community, and trying to keep up with these is difficult with our staffing. And from the community standpoint, it does take income, and that's a challenge as well for some individuals of trying to maintain their properties. Proactive nuisance inspection enforcement. We did talk about a seasonal staffing position. It's currently not in the operations budget, but that was something that we talked about, looking at a approximately 7-8 month position, 40 hours a week. Would cost around $17,000 to $20,000 annually if that were to be implemented.
What are the options of actually having somebody qualified to do that?
Someone qualified, it's likely, someone willing. It gets difficult. Our nuisance inspectors were part-time. A number of years ago, it was a high turnover position. One of the things we could do, just with our reorganization under Development and Parks, is we've gone from 3 administrative assistants essentially down to 1, having them do a lot of the paperwork that takes a lot of time for Craig and Matt. Also doing some of the annual or recurring lawn, grass mowing that we know is going to be there, and going out and inspecting that. So taking some of the time off our current nuisance inspectors where they can get out and be more proactive, and this person could fill in that blank and do some of the paperwork that we don't realize, and they have to do a lot with calls and paperwork and follow up in order to process a nuisance and have it come through council and work with the contractor on the back end and the front end. But also just the recurring nuisances that we know, the tall grass that we've sent an annual mow letter to, and every 3 weeks we're out there mowing, but we have to go check and see and contact the contractor. So that's, ideally, that'd be something that we'd maybe try and work with, where there's less, I guess, of that public interaction that is very difficult, that our full-time employees would be dealing with that, and this would be more in-house, kind of being out, observing or checking on properties, maybe not dealing with the individual as much. That might be a little easier transition for a seasonal staffing position, but
No, that makes sense.
it's something it's a difficult position to handle, especially seasonal, non-benefits. I mean, that's something where you see the turnover, but if you get the right person, whether they're retired or someone that likes in doing that, you just have to find the right person, so.
Yeah, okay.
Code compliance, that's something, an issue, just continuing to try and make the public aware of what the building, zoning, nuisance, rental requirements are. We see it often, even with working with the fire department. We'll do a rental inspection, and there'll be a fire a year later, and there won't be smoke detectors, whether they're removed, the batteries removed. Trying to maintain that compliance, not just upon initial inspection. And then private hazard tree removals on the nuisance side. As I'll talk about in parks, we are sitting in a fairly decent position from a public right-of-way and park standpoint from dealing with ash trees. We have some other areas we're working on, but on the private side, I think this spring could be the brunt of we see that issue exposed a little bit more. So it's kind of an unknown. We know there are a lot of ash trees in our community. The unknown is how many are individuals going to be able to deal with on their own, how many are we going to have to deal with on a nuisance standpoint. We have started that process, but it seems like this year and next year could be kind of that high level years of dealing with private ash trees. We do have budgeted to reduce over the next 3 years, but again, it's kind of an unknown, and it's something we're going to have to deal with regardless from a nuisance standpoint. If we identify a hazard tree and the homeowner's not able to do it, and it's a safety concern, we have to deal with it from a nuisance standpoint. Try and work with the homeowner on a payment plan. If they're not able to do that, then go through the normal process of assessing the taxes. So we do have a handful of payment plans currently that we've tried to work with individuals on for the nuisance trees.
A number of years ago, we had tree harvesting on one of the islands. Is that a recurring thing that we can figure on a regular basis, or?
Potentially, that's something we're going to be bringing forward this year, potentially this fall, evaluating the island to see. We walked it with Tree Service business last fall. And they felt it could be harvested again this year. It wouldn't be the same level as it was a number of years ago, but felt that we could do that this fall. Starting the process, it is a 3 to 4 year process, but by the time they're able to
Okay.
mark the trees, and then it's usually 2 seasons depending on river levels before someone can get all the
Okay.
trees out, so
All right,
it does take some time, but there
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be some funding there. It's just timing and the actual amount until you go through the
okay,
process.
all right, thank you.
Some of the projects within the Development Department, you see the pictures there, dealing with the Dresser Rand site in the past. Ongoing abandoned property acquisition. We keep thinking we've gone through this enough that we're gonna run out of properties to work on 657A process, but they just continue to come forward and appear, so that's something we continue to work on. Nuisance garages, that's something our nuisance inspectors tried to be a little more proactive on over the last 6 months or so, continue to work on that. They've had a few that have been painted, rehabbed, a few that have come down, so we're trying to make some slow progress on that, but working on that. Nuisance trees, as I mentioned. Inspection vehicles, that's something out of our CIP that I'll talk about a little later. We continue to get the police vehicles hand-me-down, which are sometimes good for a year or so, and then we seem to have some problems, and it's a recurring theme where in the past year, our building inspectors have had to call property maintenance a couple times out in the field. Their vehicle wouldn't start, so that's something we want to get to, especially in the winter and some of the job sites that we're on, get to a vehicle that's safe and appropriate for them guys. Grant project administration, a lot of that's through our planner and through the development department. Work on a variety of ongoing projects. The Flint River Trail, we are looking to have the Phase 1 North or Phase 1 South completed this summer and fall. So there'd be one portion remaining on Bluff Road to finish out that project. Some historic projects, we have grant for HRDP for some historic guidelines. Brownfields, we have a couple of EPA-funded projects that will have some more discussion. One of our Impact 7G is going to be coming to a future work session to talk about the assessment project. And then we were just awarded the area-wide planning project. Kind of get more details in the next couple months on what those entail. Those are full funded through EPA, but provide a good benefit to the city. Housing rehab programs, work through the Great River Housing Trust on some rehab projects, regional planning, NSP, we're looking to, actually Thursday, we have an open house, our final home, looking to build a new home on Maple and Fifth Street, and having an open house on Thursday at the Maple Leaf Center at 5:30 to try and get qualified applicants to come to that site and get qualified. And then assisting with riverfront projects, SRF, CDBG sewer, and other projects. And one project from this past year, just to note, the Iowa APA conference that we held here in Burlington had a little over 200 planners and professionals from around the state and region here, and heard a lot of good feedback on just what a quality community they felt that we had, the great projects that are going on, Roosevelt downtown. So we had a lot of people that talked to me personally about just the good things happening in our community from a development standpoint, and that was good to hear. That you don't always hear that from internally, but you get professionals here from around the state, and just there's a lot of people talking about Burlington and what's going on here, so hopefully that can continue. Just an overview of the redevelopment program. In FY16, we had 6 properties sold, 117,000 in total sales amount. That was spiked by the Gulf Lane property at over 90,000. We had 2 lots and 3 houses sold, and 1 commercial building, the typewriter building. DPI continues to work on that project. I think they've received over 100,000 in grants. They've had all the asbestos removed. They're working on getting the trusses repaired, and they have a roof lined up as well. So they're making progress on that and hope to have that in a state that it can be marketed this year. FY '17 year-to-date, we have 11 properties sold, a little over 33,000 in total sales amounts. 4 lots, 6 houses, one being to Southeast Iowa Housing with a restricted condition of owner occupied. That's something that could be considered in the future as well. And then 1 lot transfer with Frank Millard Company with the parking lot. And then this program also can be used, we use a portion of it for Great River Housing Trust match when they apply for grants that come back into the community. It had been anticipated for rehab projects. The Parkview Care Center, that is a project that will be upcoming. We're kind of waiting on the Apollo School process to see if Apollo was not redeveloped, that we'd package that as being demoed and abated as well. If Apollo does go forward with a redevelopment option, then we'd look to move forward with the asbestos abatement demo and redevelop that Parkview site on its own and sell lots there. So looking at 3 single-family residential lots that could be developed and sold there.
Have you had any inquiries on Apollo lately?
We have a meeting tomorrow. The proposals were due last Friday. Is it? So we have a meeting tomorrow with Regional Planning and Terrace to go over the proposals that were submitted. I think there was at least 2, maybe.
So for no family was interested, but it didn't have enough bedrooms. Let's keep it going. Go ahead.
Our development reports, this just goes over kind of from the building side, what we do. We had 556 total permits in FY '16 with over 254,000 collected in building permit fees. That includes, again, building, electrical, plumbing, sewer, et cetera, with the vast majority of those being the building permit fees for new construction, additions, rehab. State evaluation on the permits was 31 million. We base our building permit fees based on the valuation of construction. And we stated on our permits was over $31 million in new valuation. Rental inspections had 563 buildings inspected, over 1,300 units out of those for multifamily duplex, and 67,000 in permit fees. And nuisance inspections, we received over 1,300 complaints in FY '16. 946 of those were abated by property owner. 403 were abated by the city hired contractor. There's a little bit of carryover between fiscal years based on the timing of those. And collected over 41,000 in nuisance fees, which are paid directly to the city, and tax collections, which are collected through the county on taxes. So it was, I think, a little up on permit fees. We do have quite a few projects still anticipated, hopefully in the spring and through the next year. So hopefully we maintain a high level there, but it really depends. Something we don't have a big impact on. It's based on development and the opportunities here. So we're hoping that continues.
Eric, can you go back for a minute?
Yep.
If I'm reading those numbers right, we've done about 3,800, 3,400 inspections, rental inspections and nuisance complaints. Oh, wait, gotta take that back, about 3,000. We brought in income of 108,000, almost 109,000. Doesn't that cover the cost of those 2 nuisance inspectors?
Between the 2 of those, I'd have to check on that. It would probably, just for their actual cost, it'd probably be fairly close, probably a little under. I think they might be a little more than that with benefits. Would they be
For 2 part-time.
130 or so maybe for the 2?
About how much?
This would be, looking at the step, would it be around 130 or so maybe for the 2 with benefits and everything? Yeah, yeah.
So if we brought in a third part-time temporary person, we could probably cover his cost just in the fees he'd collect. I'm just saying.
It'd be pretty close.
We did raise rental inspection fees, I think it's 2 years ago, that we saw a substantial increase in the rental fees. I think it was around 40,000 a year, now it's 65 to 68,000 a year. And nuisance fees, the I think it's, can kind of go up and down, 25 to 40 or 45, it depends on what's paid per year, so.
Well, I'm sure if you had another person that would go up substantially, because
If you,
we're missing a lot of them.
if you, yeah, the more nuisances you do, the more that are gonna be abated by the city or paid by the owner on a tax bill, so.
Those two rental inspections, nuisance inspections are done by the same two people,
Yep.
right? And the building code then goes to the other
The other
side.
two, yep.
Yeah.
Your fees, nuisance fees, when you collect them, what does that cover?
The actual fee,
Don't go there.
When you have 41,000 of revenue there for nuisance fees, is that actual, do you have costs that are associated with that?
yeah. If you look under the budget, line item 1301, 529 miscellaneous technical services, that pays the contractor to abate the fee.
Yeah, out of those nuisance fees collections of 41,000, my assumption is you have 8 to 10,000 of revenue that is designed to cover our costs outside of, for example, the mowing. But it will still cover filing fees, et cetera, that we'll still have to cover filing fees, et cetera, out of that. So we're not netting that much out of when it shows that nuisance fee collection at 41,000, that we're not netting that much. The figure that we're netting to actually cover towards costs of a person is probably more in the somewhere in the 5 to 10,000 range.
Yeah, that would be the fee that gets assessed when we raised it to $100 to $200. That's the fee that would be collected in through us. The rest would just be going back to pay the contractor that we hired.
Yeah, that's right.
Keep trying, brother. Don't give up, Tim.
I'll bounce that math a little more.
Don't give up, brother. We'll get there.
So this is the budget and revenue from FY16 actual, 17 approved budget, and FY18 proposed. One of the skewing items out of the budget is the ash trees and dealing with that on a abatement side. In FY16, we did have quite a bit more budgeted that was not spent. In FY17, I think we had 120,000 budgeted. I don't know that we'll spend all that. It kind of depends on the spring and timing. And then at FY18, that went down to 80,000. That was budgeted for nuisance trees. So that has been a driver for that building code administration budget and kind of the unknown. Once we get through that budget, our typical nuisance or that line item has been in the $35,000 range, but as I mentioned, it's been 80, 120, 80, 75, 70, and 65 projected, so it is much higher. Our permits, FY 16 actual 361,000 total, budgeted for 357,000 in FY 17 and 374 in FY 18. Any questions on operation or budget there?
I don't have any.
Some of the CIP items, the redevelopment or housing demo program has been budgeted 20,000 annually from FY 18 to FY 22. Some of the projects in FY 18 are parking lot ID, wayfinding signage, 50,000. Nuisance rental inspection vehicles, they currently are under lease, and their lease will be expiring December of 2017, December of this year in mid-budget cycle, so that would cover the cost of purchasing those vehicles. Building inspection vehicle, And then brownfield assessment and area-wide planning, those are EPA funded, kind of an estimate breakdown of how much would come out of this fiscal year.
So that, did I understand that correctly, then, that these two Yaris's, are they?
Priuses,
Priuses, okay. Two Priuses that we've been on lease. The plan is to purchase them from at the leasing,
yeah.
at the expiration of leasing. And how are, most leases have restrictions on miles, et cetera. Are we okay on that?
Yeah,
or-
yeah.
I'm glad to see we're getting out of, I never liked leases, so I'm glad to see we're getting out of it.
What was the point of the lease to see, I can't remember if, for some reason I'm thinking that we were originally leasing because of, service or something. I can't remember what the deal was, but.
Talked about service, they were unique to our fleet being Priuses, and
Okay.
also some of the cost was shared by the Renewable Energy Committee. They contributed an annual amount to that lease amount.
Jerry's nodding his head. Okay. Just wanted to see what the deal was like.
So what is the buyout on,
It's around 13,000 per
obviously, I guess?
car, yeah.
Hello. Dumb question, sorry.
It's never a dumb question. Somebody
Dumb
out there
questions
needed to
are
hear
dumb
that, Jim.
And we have been able to use those for travel vehicles. Other departments have used those for travel vehicles as well, so they have been a benefit beyond that.
I do have to say, that was a move in the right direction. The Renewable Energy Committee, just throwing that out there.
Future projects proposed in the CIP downtown facade project. The last one is from a transformation process, was a success in downtown. There's some other properties that have inquired on that. Looking at that in FY19, continuing the parking lot and wayfinding signage in FY19. We are looking at, initial bid we got from a couple local contractors was higher than we thought and anticipated. We are continuing to look at other areas that we possibly could reduce that amount to, so.
Did the businesses that took advantage of the facade program, have they all paid what they
We
said
have-
they were going to?
We have one left, they've been paid, so they're almost paid.
Okay, they're almost done, okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Is that a new grant they're applying for, or this,
That's what it would be a new grant.
because they were denied this last one, right?
We didn't apply, we haven't applied again because we didn't have any money allocated in the budget. We've only applied the one time.
Okay.
There was a housing one that was applied for,
An owner-occupied housing grant,
that didn't get funded.
yeah,
Okay.
that's in South Hill, but we haven't applied for the facade again because it hasn't been budgeted to provide any local matching.
So our matching was to do Steamboat Senior Center, then we'd have to come up with another match, something else in it, okay.
This would anticipate just cash into the project.
Okay.
As was mentioned, one of the things that may come out of, if you were to move forward on the TIF, the housing TIF, that has the requirement for a set-aside, could you use that as a local match towards that CDBG app, or no?
You would have to.
Only if it was towards a housing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Probably not.
The next two, the brownfield, area-wide planning and assessment, again, full EPA funding, but just trying to anticipate each fiscal year, how much that would come out of the budget. Historic tax credit workshop, we have a number of historic properties downtown that are looking to develop, and a lot of the developers don't know how to take that step to develop those, and looking to apply for a grant to provide a workshop to encourage more redevelopment in the downtown. And then National Register nomination project, again, another grant project to nominate the remaining properties in the downtown to make them eligible for historic tax credits and potentially redeveloped as well. And the final one was Green Alley improvements. We did apply for a grant I think that was tied to was that through the flood project, or was it separate? For some green alley improvements.
Yeah, we did just, Charlie was saying that we were doing a green alley improvement project that was looking to tag off of the Tama Buildings green alley, and the word I had was that that was approved for funding, but doesn't have a match from us. The green alley improvements that's up here, he was looking at as a separate project. He wanted to do that this next year. We don't have funds to cover it, so it got pushed out 3 years. And yes, it does envision going for 100,000 of grant funds on top.
That would improve downtown alleys, current conditions, improve stormwater, but also improve travel conditions on those. Those last three items were requested in earlier years and all moved back to fit within the CIP. Some other projects that weren't programmed or funded haven't been discussed. I guess the sidewalk program was in the budget for a number of years, hasn't come up as a priority, but that would be something that could be considered down the road. Wayfinding signage, I guess tying into the parking lot and ID and signage up above, but that's something the Convention and Visitors Bureau completed a study on. Haven't gotten all the final numbers on that as well. And future housing or neighborhood rehab projects. As Jim mentioned, we applied for a grant last year, but we're not successful in that grant in the South Hill area. Potential match could be used through the redevelopment fund, but that'd be something we'd look at in the future as well.
Can we go back just a second, Eric, on the parking lot ID wayfinding signage? We have $50,000 in this budget, and you said you thought the bids were a little higher than what you thought they might be?
We got bids from local contractors based on the wayfinding plan, and we've talked to Prison Industries and some others on that, and hopefully this week have some actual numbers that might lower that amount, so. But the numbers that came in from the local sign businesses were higher than we anticipated, and that's what's in the budget right now.
I guess I'm just asking the question if there's a possibility that we wouldn't spend that money, then if the budget, if it came in too high, is that a possibility?
Yeah.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll have something more this week yet that,
But you're still gonna see you're still gonna find out what you can whittle that down to, right?
yeah, we've been talking to Prison Industries on some cost and ability to do that and other contractors as well, but this was based on the bid we got from some local
Yeah,
contractors, so.
okay. Well, I'm gonna keep that in mind, that $50,000 is maybe something we can do somewhere else.
So that's
Bless
the
your heart, Jim.
development side of the budget. Any questions on development, building, planning and zoning?
On these reoccurring nuisances that we have, that we're going back to these lots and mowing over and over and over again, would any of those be eligible for abandoned property in 657?
They have to have a structure on them to be a 657A, and we do that for ones that have a structure. If they're just a vacant lot, we can't acquire them through that process. We could just petition the county for tax deed or go through that process, which we've done on a couple. As a lengthy process, and we've tried to do that on some of them that we've identified, but has to have a house or structure on it to go through that process.
On properties that have been identified with nuisances that we've contacted the owners and the owners have abated them, do we bill them anything? Is there an administrative fee that?
No, if they abate them before, there's no fee. If we get a nuisance call and we tell them you have a nuisance, you need to mow it by this date, or we're gonna hire someone. If they do it by that date, there's no fee.
Would you say we have an expense in that department when
There's
that happens?
Yeah, time expense by staff, yeah. I don't know
I like where you're going with that.
Would it be unreasonable, council, to start implementing a fee when we have to send people out on an identified nuisance that even though they abate it?
It's costing the city to send people out there to do that, and most companies are starting to do that. If they've got a tag or something like that, they're charging you the extra money because they've had to do that. I don't think it's unreasonable.
No, I think it's a great idea. I mean, time is money.
I don't wanna gouge anybody, but I think if we've got to expend taxpayer dollars to do it, why not have a fee? We're doing it for ones that we have to abate.
The only people that are gonna complain about this are people that don't wanna take care of their yards. And it's your yard, you know, those are the minimum basic requirements. Doesn't have to be, you know, trimmed and edged and all of that stuff, but we do require that to live within city limits. We want you to keep your grass cut, and,
That's not the only thing. There's,
Well, no, but-
the trash and
Well,
the.
keep your
and
stuff
the
up.
Vehicles and the other things that they have to deal with.
seems like most of the stuff when I go through the nuisance, a lot of them are, from cutting grass and doing yard work. We get tons of that during the summer, and other stuff too, but they're basic requirements to live in city limits.
There's
You
three
keep-
that saying can you bring something forward as a recommendation?
I can bring some options forward on that.
I just wanna cover the cost. I'm not looking at gouging anybody.
I had a question about, the fees for nuisance abatements and also rental inspections, when the last time there was an increase in that, in both of those.
Nuisance, or rentals was, I believe, 2 or 2.5 years ago. It was, I guess, different formula that it did raise revenues about $20,000 at that time going forward. And then rentals, I think that was around that same time, 2 years ago or so. We had a $35 per second fee, and it went to $100, $200 per second fee, which was a substantial increase, but that was probably 2 years ago.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that we should maybe have an increase, whether it be, small, but something? I don't know if anybody else would agree with that.
I mean, if it's justified, if we're not covering our costs, then, to do it, I would like to see an analysis if we're covering the cost. And if it's I think if there's a case where we do an inspection, Annie, and they have to go back a second time because of, that it's not up to the code, maybe a recall fee.
We do have a
You do
third
have that.
inspection fee. If we tell them to do something, and then we'll go back and inspect it. If, after that, it's a $50 fee every time
Okay. We'll see.
on the rental side. Yeah.
Yeah, while you're figuring that, let us know if that fee's covering the. You agree?
And I would second, I don't think anybody's looking to try to hustle, but we definitely want to at least at the bare minimum on services is cover the fees of what we're sending people out to do. I think that's only fair to the rest of the people that are paying, the taxpayers that are paying that benefits.
Only comment I'd make is, as he presents some of that, he needs to make some comparisons against other communities. On a statewide level, the state legislature is concerned with the fees that are charged for building permits as well as rental inspections at this point already.
Concerned
On
in
a
what way?
On a statewide basis, they feel that communities are charging too much, and there's some discussion about putting some mandated caps on what those fees are. I think it just makes sense that in an environment like that we do need to make sure that where we sit on a statewide basis. And your point's well taken. We need to make sure that we're not charging more than what the actual cost to do these services is.
Mine's not less than what the actual charge is.
Well, the state's concerns that we don't charge more than what the actual cost of services are.
Which is the same place, it's just the vocabulary.
Yes.
On the building permit fee, it's a charge per valuation, so as costs go up, the permit fee naturally goes up as well, because if 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, it cost $100,000 to build a building, and now it costs $120,000, your fee's based on the cost, so it naturally goes up, but the rental and nuisance is just a static fee, so.
Okay, thank you.
Now, how about fees for regular nuisance abatements? I mean, I know, I'm sure they fluctuate between how much you have to do, or, you know,
It's just a standard $100 for the first time we abate it and $200 the second time. That's for actual abatements that we do.
yeah.
Yep.
Has that changed ever?
That was 2 years
To
ago.
the same-
Yeah, it
okay.
was 25 and 35, I think, before that.
Okay.
So it went from 25 to 100 and 35 to 200.
Okay.
And-
I was thinking about aiming it more towards deterring people from letting their properties get that bad, not even about our time, you know, what our time is worth. That's what I was kind of getting at was,
I know what you're saying, I just don't know how you.
I think that was
Yeah.
one of the goals when we changed it to 100 to
Yeah.
200, because if it's a $20 mow job, it's still $200 fee
mhm.
if it's your second nuisance. But, yeah, that,
It doesn't discourage some, though.
The,
You must not be paying enough then.
the building permit fees cover the cost of our guys doing that, doesn't it?
It covers both the two gentlemen as well as the administrative assistant. Pretty much comes out and covers, nets out pretty well with that.
Yeah.
You'll notice our two departments, both of them have a net cost, but you have two, four, 7 people between those two departments. And Charlie doesn't fit so much. Part of his time should really be justified within that building area. And part of Eric's time should be too, but we certainly can't net them out.
Okay.
so that's through the development department. Do you want to wait till Thursday on the Parks and Rec, or do you want to?
You have about an hour's presentation to do here.
We got nothing else to do, it's Monday night.
If you don't do it now, your Thursday night's gonna be between what Nick will present and will be over, I would assume would be over 2 hours.
We've got a lot of discussion at the end of this.
We don't.
We're cutting it pretty close, so I don't mind staying away from that. Do you?
Yes.
What about you two?
So much for free.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
That figures. Do you want to stay for the Parks and Rec tonight, or do you want to wait
Absolutely.
until Thursday?
Yes,
Absolutely.
All right. Sorry,
yes.
Get a good drink, Eric. Or anyone to leave?
I would like,
You wanted to leave?
you got a ball game
well,
tonight?
no, I don't, but I haven't been home in
Do we want
many
to,
hours.
do you want to take a short break?
But you have these things.
Guys, you want to take,
It's 3:30.
you want to take a short break, or you
No.
want to just go for it?
Just go for it.
Okay. Councilwoman Wilson wants to get home, so let's go. Eric.
All right. And Parks and Recreation, this covers 6 separate activity codes: parks maintenance, forestry, park swimming pool, recreation, the golf course and recplex, which are enterprise funds. Some of the issues items, as always, is staffing, with the seasonal employees. We have trying to maintain some of the employees from year to year is difficult. Do have turnover year to year and also within the year, so maintaining those. A lot of those facilities require 9 months of seasonal staffing, and that can be often difficult. Aging facilities, amenities, maintaining attractive, usable facilities and sites. We have a lot of park shelters that were built quite a few years ago. Even the recplex is fairly new, but some general maintenance and update to that facility is required. So just trying to maintain our facilities in a manner that people want to continue to use them as well. Ash trees, as I mentioned, this is on the forestry side, so this deals with right-of-way and parks trees. We had 120,000 in this current fiscal year, 80,000 proposed upcoming fiscal year, 70 in 19, and going back down to 35 in FY '20. And then on the enterprise funds, the Plex and golf course, just the use of facilities and competition for time. We'll talk about that later as well. Parks and forestry, we have 10 to 13 parks seasonal employees, 2 to 4 forestry, depending on the year and budget. 13 park sites, 200 acres, over around 11,000 right-of-way trees and 2,500 park trees in wooded areas. The equipment's vital to operational efficiency. Having mowers that operate, chippers and trucks that our staff can use is imperative. On the park sides, there are some annual changes based on project need, maintaining some of our shelters and sites and playground upkeep, and then plan to reduce the forestry budget as we catch up to EAB. We'll continue to address trees over the coming years, including stumps in the upcoming years. That'll probably be the bigger issue. We've wanted to get the ash trees down, remove the canopy and the trunks, but a lot of the stumps were left. They weren't seen as a priority. We wanted to remove the hazard aspect, but now going back and removing the stumps is kind of where we're headed, as well as we've neglected to deal with some of our other tree issues over the last couple of years, trying to focus on ash trees and get those dealt with. So we do have some other trees, silver maple, some of the other trees that are in our right of way that need to be dealt with as well. Block pruning to make sure the trees aren't too low over our streets as well. So those are items that we'll be addressing in the next couple of years, and hopefully after the next couple of years, we'll be able to get back to a normal schedule and rate. If you remember from previous updates, we had around 960 ash trees in the right-of-way and parks to start with a few years ago. Currently, we have 63 ash trees in the right-of-way and 32 in the parks. Out of those, 35 trees in the right-of-way are being treated by homeowners. We put out a contract every 3 years and contact the homeowners if they want to continue to pay to have those treated. That's up to the homeowner. They still have to be evaluated to be in a condition that we would recommend treating. If they're not, they are still city trees, and we would recommend or have those removed if they're not in a condition that they'll be safe if they are treated. But that is the cost to the homeowner. They did desire to do that. It wasn't a cost the staff felt was something that the city should bear ongoing, because it does have to be done for the life of the tree. Expect to remove the remaining non-treated ash trees by the summer of 2017. Currently, we have approximately 500 stumps in the right-of-way that need to be removed. We did remove 360 in calendar year 2016, but anticipate 150 or more additional stumps in the next 2 years. So we are looking to remove around 300 stumps this year and next year, and hopefully catch up to that after that. A lot of our contractual costs, that $80,000 goes towards tree removals, trees that are larger. Our staff doesn't have the time or equipment to remove some of the larger trees. And then stump grinding, trying to do some in-house, but also contract that out so that we're not 10 years down the road and still dealing with stumps. It's something that we want to try and address in the next couple of years. And then some other trees that, as I mentioned, we've been focused on ash trees. There are some other trees that have become a issue over within the right-of-way parks that we need to deal with as well. So I guess the goal there again is within the next couple of years, hopefully we're at a point where we're back to normal, provided no other issues come up with trees. Park improvement projects, some of the complete or semi-complete ongoing projects. Mosquito Park improvements made a big impact up there and did some improvements, got some donations for benches and signage at that location. The Crapo Park outdoor classroom is complete. We're working on some signage for that. That's at the bottom image of your on the screen there. That's intended to be a site where schools could use, educate about nature, trees, natural resources. We'll have some signage boards on trees and their impact, and kind of some science type boards that could be used for some of our programming and getting schools involved in the parks. Cannon renovation at Crapo Park. The cannons have been repainted. Those are looking very nice. We do have some concrete work and some site work to do there as well. The Campfire Girls fireplace that's just over the hill from the cannons as well was tuck pointed. Do have some site work to do there as well. And we've been doing some band shell improvements, painting, lighting, some landscaping on that site. Indoor shelter improvements at Perkins Park. We've had some appliances replaced and some painting and windows that have needed upgrade there. With a lot of these, we have sought out additional grants and funding, as well as used some donations, particularly for some of the site amenities. Future, I'm going to be talking about next Monday at the council work session, the Edwin and Gladys White Park, some improvements we're looking to do there, and some funding that we have for that. But I'll be giving a presentation on that. We're hoping to do that this summer. The Dankworth Park Pool, some of the improvements that have been going on there, and continue disc golf course updates.
The pool house gets a new roof, I see, right?
It's currently, it should be done hopefully this week, actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
No more leaks?
That's,
Yippee.
that's the hope, yeah. Yep. It was as wet inside as it was outside
Yeah.
sometimes.
What about the proposal to make the pool a year-round thing? Is that in the plan at all, or?
It's not currently budgeted. They are coming, we asked them to come next Monday to talk about what those
Oh,
costs would be.
okay.
So,
Okay,
yep.
thank you.
We met with them on Friday, so they'll have some additional information and talk about that next Monday as well. Looking at a parks nursery to replace some of our own trees that we could replace at a lower cost. Stump removals, amenities, sidewalks and ADA, that's something we try to stay on top of or need to stay on top of, is making sure our sidewalks in our parks are safe and compliant as well. And those are a lot of times older sidewalks, so. And then Park and Rec Endowment Fund, that's something we're not in the budget, but something we're gonna try and look to set up a fund that could grow and potentially fund some of our projects in our parks in future years. Swimming pool and recreation, those are 1603 and 1604. We generally have 15 to 20 employees for the pool, 4 to 6 for summer camp and recreation. Pool has been something that I've struggled at times to try and get full staffing for that, but that's something we continue to work on. Issues and items for that. The pool did have a very good year last year. It is very weather dependent. We had a very good summer for the pool. And also school year dependent. We're open generally from Memorial Day to Labor Day, but kind of depending on the school. We are looking at the pool budget to see if some cost equalization due to the new liner. We did have some leaks that in the old pool that we were paying more for water that we think have been stabilized, but we want to go through a second season to before we reduce that too much. And then that subsequently reduces some of our chemical cost as well. So we could see some reduced operating cost at the pool over the next couple of years.
Good deal.
Capital projects, the liner was completed last year. I think the liner, the South Hill got a grant for some passes and lessons, and then just the weather all kind of rolled into having a pretty good year at the pool. And we hope to continue on that with some of the other improvements. The roof is being completed, I said hopefully this week. And then some future upgrades and updates, looking at pump improvements, guard stands, diving boards, and shade structures. And we do continue to seek additional funds through the foundations and grants to help supplement some of the costs for that and complete these. The Perkins Park Summer Camp also had a increase this past year. Went from 25 to 30 on average per week to 35 to 40, with an increase in revenue from 18,000 to almost 23,000 in revenue for our summer camp that we run at Perkins Park. Is a good activity, a good location. We had a lot of good feedback this year. Had some good counselors. Some other programs through the recreation is the City Day in the Park. Try and do some archery, youth tennis, and after-school programs. Brad works with that as well. And then the Great River Bridge Race, which this year is scheduled for May 13th, 2017. So
Are you gonna beat me
We'll,
this year?
we'll see how that goes.
He spanked you last year.
I beat you by 2 seconds, or maybe one.
One
Oh, did you
second.
win last year?
One
That's right,
second.
you did beat him, didn't you?
So pool numbers, attendance and revenues, were up substantially this past year. The one difficulty is, with a lot of our rec programs, golf course, recplex pools, they operate on a season basis versus our fiscal year basis. But attendance in 2016 was over 13,600 and 60,000 in revenues, which was up quite a bit over previous years. So that's a trend we hope to continue. Don't know that it will stay at that level. It's just so much dependent on weather and whether we can be open or not based on temperature and rain and everything else. So we did have an optimal year last year. But we
Those
do,
numbers reflect the free days that were given, and
yep,
that's all in there.
yep. And the free days, yeah, there is a payment for that. We do still collect concessions. But there was an increase in lessons as well through that South Hill grant. So we'll see the impact of not having all that this year. Our budgets for the four non-enterprise funds, park maintenance, forestry, swimming pool, and recreation, are down from FY17 budget in proposed, but up from the actual cost in FY16. A lot of our costs are personnel and seasonal staffing costs, and our staffing is a lot of times at the pool based on how many days we're open. Maintenance and operations, or park and forestry on how well we can keep staff on hand and kind of when the season ends and the season starts, so depending on weather there. Again, in the forestry operations, we do have the tree contracting that has elevated that budget over the last few years. But we do hope to see that reduced starting in FY20. But again, it was 120,000 in FY17, reduce that to 80,000 in FY18 and 70,000 planned next year, and then down to 35,000. So the forestry budget should hopefully go down over the next 3 years. So that's on the park and rec side. Before I move on to the golf course, any questions on that side? And I'll cover the CIP items for everything at the end of this. The golf course, again, we've gone to a 8-year replacement on golf carts with batteries at 4. Some of the trends, similar to last year, golf outings continue to rise. Play is weather dependent, and the demographics of our players at the golf course represent the community. We do have an older population that does represent at the community. We have seen a decrease in some of the season pass sales, and that's kind of seen at the Recplex as well, as some people age out or no longer play. It's not quite the backfill that it used to be of younger individuals coming out to purchase season passes. Similar to the Recplex, it seems younger families, their kids are so involved in that, different things now as well, that maybe the parents aren't playing golf as much or playing in the leagues at the Recplex as much, but maybe their kids are doing a little bit more. So that's something has an impact on the golf course and the Recplex as well.
Do you, off the top of your head, know what the deadline is for that early bird season pass thing?
Has been February 14th in the past.
That's,
It's right around there.
Valentine's Day,
Yeah,
roughly.
usually is what it's been. Yeah.
You're familiar with the golf course, aren't you?
I'm familiar with the golf course. It's a great place, folks.
Would you say the golf course and the Recplex have a good working relationship? I mean,
Yeah.
I think maybe they can help each other, maybe the.
All
Recplex
of
can
our
help the
entire
golf
parks
course.
department, and we share equipment back and forth, so that we maximize use of seeders and sprayers and tractors. I mean, they go between the parks and golf course and Recplex continually, and the staffing consult on each other and try and work with each other. Maybe doing additional marketing or kind of cross-marketing might be something we need to do a little bit better, or try and do that
But for the-
some more,
for the
yeah.
help of the golf course.
So you see expenditures and revenues, the past 2 actual fiscal years, outside of capital, for operations, the golf course, made 9,400 to 4,400. This current fiscal year is budgeted, that it would be 1,000 loss, and then proposed was 6,300. Kind of looking at the trend and seeing if that's something we can reverse. I'll talk about capital as we go forward as well.
One of the things with his expenditures there, some of his part-time expenditures for payroll, you tend not to expend as
Yeah.
much as what you have budgeted. So just because there's a budgeted deficit there doesn't create a level of, as much of a level of concern, because they do tend to have categories they stay under. But until you see the year actually occur, you don't really know what's gonna happen with,
Right.
based off of weather.
And there are those of us that just assume it doesn't rain on particular days, you know, so that's good.
Go free.
This shows the rounds played from fiscal year versus the season passes. So the rounds played are up over the last 4 years at a little over 19,000. Season passes are down. I think that's kind of a little bit indicative of the golf course, where you still have some of the core players that get season passes, but a lot of the younger families or individuals might not want to commit to a season pass, but play when they want to play, so they don't buy that. But did see our rounds up this past year. Quality of the course and their experiences are critical to continue play for our customers. We do have a reputation as a very well-maintained course, and that helps and benefits us that people do want to come play here. Fees are examined annually to remain competitive in the area. We did just do a fee increase. It's something we evaluate annually. And as I mentioned, rounds are up, but pass holders are down. So we do see some increased revenue on the daily pass fees versus the season pass fees. The Recplex, again, has a reputation, very high quality facility that helps attract and maintain a lot of our tournaments. A lot of these tournaments, you have teams that play all over the state, all over the region, and they have an impact on whether they want to come back here or not, is the quality and experience they have here. So that is very important to maintaining the leagues or the tournaments that we have here at the Recplex. Some of the issues, parking concessions, trying to maintain staffing to have those flow very well, restrooms. Parking, we did add a driveway for additional parking on the west side of the Recplex for some of our larger soccer tournaments. And then the positive community impact of the Recplex beyond just what you see from the city revenue. Talk about that a little bit more. The impact on the community from hotels, shopping, retail, sales tax, and hotel motel tax. Fort Madison Outdoor Complex did open, and they are a new competition that does have an impact on our league play. We did see some reduction in some of our slow pitch softball and volleyball leagues that are on competing nights. We have historically had some teams from Fort Madison come up here on those nights, and that did reduce some of that. And then replacement of league players, as I mentioned before, is slowed as some of the normal league players age out. We're not seeing quite the backfill of some of the younger players, whether that be other activities they're involved in, families where their kids are busy, or just not coming out to that. But our tournaments seem very strong. It's the league play that we need to look at and examine a little bit more. So as you see here, the actual from FY15 to FY16 was a very dramatic change that wasn't anticipated. That's something we'll continue to examine, but did leave a large reduction in the revenues. This is the schedule of events for tournaments over this coming year. Currently have one open date, the August 5th and 6th, but do have a couple new tournaments over last year that would be in this fiscal year as well, in the April-May timeframe, and an additional tournament in next fiscal year that we didn't have last year. as always, the monster match at the end of the year is a very large draw to the community. This is the Recplex tournament history. We had 29 total tournaments in 2016, 823 teams, 551 of these were from a 1 hour away or more. And based on the travel information and information we'd gotten before from a company based on that, estimating the local spending, which is just a factor based on number of teams, how far away they are, and how long the tournament is. Based on those factors, it was estimated $3.6 million in direct local spending for traveling teams, including hotel, food, shopping, and gas in 2016. So kind of hard to know exactly if that's accurate, but it is a substantial impact on the community. And as you see, our tournament teams have kind of gotten up to that over 800 number and continued there. Some of the ups and downs do depend on whether a tournament would be rained out or not. The league teams is where the trends go down, particularly on the slow pitch softball and volleyball, where we do have more competition being in Fort Madison. We had 83 teams, league teams last year, compared to 96 over a 3-year average. 16 fast pitch softball, which is up from a 13 3-year average. 44 volleyball compared to 52 average. 145 soccer, which is up over 145 teams in the 3-year average. 12 flag football compared to 15, and so 300 total teams, and that should be 2016, compared to 322 3-year average. So our admission revenue was down in 2016. It was also down in 2015 versus our concessions were down, but they were up in 2015. Attendance at the Recplex was 76,000 for an average of 508 per day in 2016. May was down 4,500. The other months were comparable to previous years. We did have a rain out of a tournament, which doesn't make up for everything, but so a lot of our softball and volleyball are going on as well. So you can see the attendance figures over the last few years. Last year was down, and the year before we did average 95,000 over 2012 and 2013. And a lot of that is the league play as our tournament play has gone up. Part of that, it's something I know we've looked at in the past. There is a $2 admission fee for anyone that wants to come, whether you're a player, whether you're a spectator. It's not always that way in other communities. We are set up as an enterprise fund. Some of the other facilities, there is not a fee, but that's something that we do have, and that I don't know whether that affects whole families coming out or not, but that it can be a factor for some individuals. Our park CIP, we have trail maintenance budgeted annually over the next 5 years. It does go up to 10,000 in the last years. The trail along West Avenue behind the Recplex was installed a number of years ago. That's something that will need some maintenance in the coming years, and want to be able to maintain the trails that we have as they are an attraction. Equipment, parks truck, 2 parks tractors, a forestry bucket truck rebuild, golf carts, mower, Recplex spreader, utility gator, and UTV. As I mentioned before, a lot of our equipment, this might be the primary user of it, but they do share as needed. If there's a day that a different division needs a piece of equipment just for that day, then there is sharing that occurs. We try not to duplicate, particularly on some items that aren't used every day. Mowers are used every day, but some of the other items we try not to duplicate too much. Projects, Dankworth Park Playground. This may be pushed back into order to fully complete White Park. I'll talk about that a little bit more next Monday. Currently, there's $100,000 set aside from Starker funds with no city contribution in the current year budget. We would desire to potentially look at hotel funds in the future and may complete this in phases, but that depends on funding.
Yeah, this is one of the things that even I think that this would be a stronger project if we had allocated funds from hotel motel towards this. As it is, one of the several of his projects got pushed back from the time where he wanted to have them done, and I think I left everything on the plan outside of the endowment fund. But at least one of the projects that I pushed back to FY '22, there isn't actual funding for. However, if you were to take out the funding for the fire equipment, now there's actually funding to cover that project that he has out in FY '22. And really, we were front-loaded on projects. As you start talking about that, the local option sales tax, the first couple of years were 20 to, actually, in FY '20, we're gonna be about 40,000 lower than what we should have if we're gonna be at the 15% carryover balance that we're trying to be at. So, I guess I'm just trying to say we don't have enough funds to do what needs to be done. And this is one of the projects that I felt really bad to see that we aren't allocating any funds towards to try to make happen.
And right now, looking, and I'll talk about Monday, the priority just to complete White Park in whole and not do that in phases and then move this back possibly and try and do a more substantial part of that, so. But this is looking at a destination playground. The playground in Dancourt Park is a very aged wooden structure, looking at something that would be a draw as well there, so. Other projects, the Recplex Shelter House, looking at 10,000 from the soccer club, contributing towards that, filter replacements, pump improvements, and the Flint Hills Golf Course Pump House. We did have 40,000 in pump improvements combined in FY '16 and '17 that were not spent. Based on our conversations with, I guess, the companies that we were talking to, we thought we might be able to do some in phases, but based on the age and condition of our structure, they ultimately, once we got down to it and were ready to move forward with some of the improvements, they said they would not advise doing this in phases because you're gonna have trouble with some of the new features and the old features. And this pumping house controls our irrigation, which if that goes down, then our golf course revenues would go down pretty substantially. That really makes our golf course run. So that's something that we did not spend in the last 2 fiscal years, but want to complete the entire project in this coming fiscal year. Future items, equipment, just for normal operations, forestry brush chipper, parks mower, utility gator, golf carts. In FY '19, skid steer, fairway mower, and batteries in FY '20, parks truck and mower, Recplex sprayer and golf carts in FY '21, and forestry dump truck, parks mower, UTV, Recplex mower, golf course tractor in FY '22 with batteries. On the improvement side, the Mason Road sidewalk and trail in FY '19, that is one we do have the grant funds to complete that. That would be from the Edstone School back past Sunrise West to allow a connection there. Recplex playground surfacing, FY '20's playground roof. In FY '21, the park sidewalks, as I mentioned before, trying to maintain safe sidewalks within our parks as well as ADA. The Flint River Trail, Phase 1A, that will be trying to break that down into smaller sections to apply for get more grants for. That would be from Oak Street to Cash Street. West Avenue Trail, which is in front of Notre Dame's ball field, connecting the trail from Edstone to the Recplex. Dancourt restroom, which currently just has Starker funds allocated towards that. Pool diving board and guard stands, and Perkins parking lot improvements. In FY '21, finishing the Flint River Trail, hopefully. Crapo Park tennis court resurfacing, park amenity improvements, and pool deck replacement repair. Funding for these, the trails were out of local option sales tax, and all the other improvements were out of hotel motel funds. As we mentioned, park projects without city funds currently allocated. The Dankworth Park Playground currently just has Starker funds as the only funding source. The restroom just has Starker funds as the funding source. And one project that is not in the 5-year CIP, but has been discussed, I guess, from staff perspective, was the Recplex soccer concession restroom. Maybe something that look at in the future near that west end of the soccer fields. So again, our goals, like all the other departments, trying to improve our community, make us a great place to live, work, and play. And on our end, trying to have a positive impact by the services that we provide and affecting the quality of life, economic development, some of the stuff that's harder to quantify, but trying to make Burlington a place that people want to come and live, people want to stay, young families want to stay. We see so much anymore that some families, individuals, they choose locations to live before they choose a place to work, and not that we can be or aren't that, but that's something that through our park services and through our community development, we're trying to make Burlington a better place to live, work, and play. Questions?
Didn't say thank you first.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Your entry fee into the Recplex, you kind of give me the impression that we could be better off if we didn't have that fee.
I don't know that we would. It's just a factor to consider. I think it's something we need to maybe look at, whether
Have you
there's
looked at
different-
other- What the other surrounding ones are doing, Is Fort Madison charging you an entry fee?
I'll talk to Kirk and John on that a little bit more and maybe get some information. I'm not saying that we need to do away with it. I don't know if there's different structures or different fees, maybe for different tournaments or leagues or different pricing points that we need to do, but that's something we need to evaluate just on a whole and I am bringing forward some fee increases at the Recplex, but I think that's something we really need to evaluate on other competitors and other facilities that are successful. What are their fee structures, just on a whole basis, so I think that's something we'll try and do.
So I wonder if you want to look at your food prices and beverage prices.
Yeah, that's something we do annually. Try and stay comparable from the golf course to the Recplex, and I know the Recplex is able to offer some specials too during the league nights to try and encourage some of that. But concessions are a big driver of cost or revenues out at the Recplex especially.
So anybody that plays in a league, I assume their team pays a fee to play.
Mm-hmm.
And then each player has to pay $2 every night to get in?
Yep,
Plus you have to pay for
an umpire.
an
An
umpire.
umpire. Yeah.
So that is one of the concerns that we've kind of talked about, whether, when you have the 3 different layers of fees, if
Just-
that doesn't have some detriment to.
Yeah, is there a way
How
to
much
consolidate
detriment
those
does
or do
affect those
those
numbers?
better?
So, do they play like once a week or usually?
Yeah, usually one night a week, maybe more than one game, but usually one night a week. Depending on the league you're in, there might be some that are 2 nights a week.
Who do we have yet to hear from? Right it?
Nick is left on Thursday.
Nick on Thursday.
No one tonight. Is that disappointing?
Listen, I've been in Sioux Falls, I just can't handle all this. 450.
It's been a long evening. Jim, do you have anything to close out? Mr. Tislin, do you have anything besides anything you said
Thank
tonight? Okay, we're gonna wrap it up tonight. Annie, do you have anything tonight?
Thank you.
Tim Scott? I just wanted to throw out there, reminding everybody again, in a community, you're gonna have a mix. It's going to be necessities, things that you need, essentials, and then there's going to be, on the rec, things that people enjoy to do. You have to have these things, and it's about finding that mix, that happy medium. And you can say, well, we don't need these things, but if we didn't have some of the things that we have, you probably wouldn't be here right now, so, or some of you. So we're trying to find that mix. Just be mindful of that. You just can't say, well, shut this off and shut this off and expect the community to remain the same. Again, be participants in that process, but know that as you're making demands or requesting things or asking for things, But I got quite a few emails, and they say, well, we don't need this, and we don't need that, but keep things in perspective and know that we do need some of these things. Our parks are a good draw. We get many people that make sure that they stop in when they pass through Burlington during the summer time to visit our parks, things like that. So just be mindful of those as we move forward in the budget. Mayor Pro Tem?
Go to Mr. Fleming.
Pardon?
Go to you. You're up. Anything else?
Well, not at this time, I haven't collected my thoughts yet,
All right.
but I reserve the right to speak. at a
You
later
always
date.
do. Nothing else?
I would just mention I don't know what, we had some folks in here, I don't know if that was Vineyard Street that might have been about. That was something that we were supposed to have a project back to you, last fall, after the presentation that was done. Previous city engineer never got to that project, and we ended up with no city engineer until November. We're way behind on projects, just for an understanding, not meaning that Vineyard Street isn't something that needs to be addressed, but probably what will happen with that long-term, since Nick isn't here, I think that they were looking at using one of the using an outside engineering firm to put together a cost proposal on that. But with the time guidelines that we had to get Mazel out. We have 3 street projects that we're trying to get done this year that we're well behind on. So hopefully folks can understand and have a little bit of patience with them trying to get to that. It needs to be gotten to, but it has not occurred at this point.
Has anybody communicated that, John?
I don't know if they have or not, so I'll talk to Nick that he needs to get that done too.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Back.
How much?